Hello, and for this video I will be showcasing how my multimedia database works. So I've created a game library that stores information about games, specifically video games, but it's not limited to that. It could be any game that you want to store in your own personal game library. It doesn't work in the sense of like game libraries like Steam where you can download games and play them. This is more of like a simplistic version of that, a very simplistic game library where you can just type in game information and it's just stored there. It's kind of a way just to keep track of your favorite games. So this video is a showcase on how it works. The technologies and tools that I use to create this project are Node.js. Node.js is the programming language I use for the server-side environment. JavaScript is the language I use for the front-end environment, the programming language I use for the front-end environment. Also with EJS, which is just embedded JavaScript. I use MySQL for the database. I use XAMPP for setting up the MySQL server. I use Visual Studio Code as the code editor. I used Postman for testing my requests. I used npm for downloading and managing my packages that I installed, basically the project dependencies. And I used Midjourney for AI image generation, which this project only has 2 images in it, and I used AI to generate both of them because I pay for that service. And I used Express.js for building my API so that the front end and the back end could communicate with each other. And I also used HTML and CSS for making the web page. Okay, so here's a showcase of how my project works. So the first thing that you're going to have to do regardless is set up the MySQL server and the MySQL database. So I personally use XAMPP to set up the server. But you don't have to use XAMPP. You can use anything you want. There's many different ways to set up a MySQL server. But that's not what this video is about. After you set up the server, you're going to want to set up the database. Me personally, I used MySQL Workbench. Once MySQL Workbench is loaded up, you're going to want to create a connection, which I've already created. But you would just click here if you don't already have one. The default information is good. A password if you have it, which you'll create when you install all of this stuff if you don't already have one. But as I stated, I already have a connection, so I'm just going to double click and go right into mine. And I already have the library database created. What you're going to want to do is click File and then open SQL script. And then you're going to navigate to where I have SQL, the folder named SQL in the game library folder. And you're going to want to run this SQL titled librarydb.sql. Once you have this loaded up, you'll click this to execute the script. And it should say good to go down here. Check marks. That means it's all good and it was created. Now you might see nothing here, and that's fine. You just need to refresh it. Or you could just right click and click refresh all, and then you'll see your newly created database. And your table with all the columns. This is how the games are stored in their data. Okay, perfect. Now that we have that taken care of, we can move to the next part. Personally, I use Visual Studio Code. So that's what I'll open it with. I'll open this project with Visual Studio Code. Now, if your MySQL is using a password, you need to put it here. Just let's say if your password let's say your password is 123. You will put 123 here and then save. And you can save by pressing Control S. Or you can just go up here to File and Save All. My SQL currently doesn't use a password, so I'm going to leave this blank. Now, the first thing you're going to want to do after that is you're going to type npm install. And then you're going to hit enter. What this is going to do is make sure that you have all needed dependencies to make this project run, which I already have all of them, so I'm not going to run that. After that, you're going to want to type npm start, which all that's going to do is run this script right here. So essentially, you could really just type node server.js. All this is going to do is start up your server So either way works. And you should see this, and you will click on this by doing control click. Which will open this web page. And it says you currently have no games because our database is empty. We currently have no games in the database. So let's add a game. To add a game, you go up here to this add new game and click. And you fill out the necessary detail. The only required field to fill out is the title. Everything else can be left blank and it will be given a default. But you must have a title. So let's click add game. And now we see Spider-Man. And if we look in our database and refresh, we see Spider-Man has now been added. And the only information that'll be displayed, the title and the description. If you want to see the other data fields, that's where you would click more information. And this is where you'll see the release date, the developer, the publisher, and the genre. And you click the X right there to close out of that. And I also provided a demo SQL to put some games into the table. So if you go back to File, Open SQL, and choose this demo underscore games SQL, and then same as we did before, click here to execute the script. It should be successful. And now, if we refresh, we'll see all the games that we just added. And the remove button also works. So let's say that I no longer like Legend of Zelda and I want to remove it. And so then if we look into our database, now we only see Spider-Man, Super Smash Bros, Super Mario Bros, and Minecraft. And let's say I don't like Spider-Man anymore. I remove it. Refresh. It's updated. And that's how you run this project. There's another way to start up this project, so now I'm going to showcase that way. Close out of here by pressing Control C, and then ask me if I want to terminate the job. I say yes. And we'll just close out of this. So you'll still need to set up the MySQL server and the MySQL database. That doesn't change. The only thing that changes is now you don't have to install Visual Studio Code. And what you're going to do is you're going to go to the directory where the Games Library folder is located. So you'll just cd into that directory. Once you're in the directory, all you need to do is type node server.js. And now the server is running. So now I can copy this. And you have to right click and click copy. Do not click Control C because that will exit out the program and terminate it, just like we did in Visual Studio Code. Now if we go to that URL, same thing, same way. But this time we use the terminal instead of using Visual Studio Code's terminal. The only difference is with Visual Studio Code, we didn't have to really cd into the directory. And that's it. Really quickly, I want to showcase Postman in another way that you could just quickly test. I used Postman to test my API requests. So here I'm using a GET request at the URL. See, it says status 200 OK. Now let's do /games. /game is the API created by Express, where I put where all the game data is stored as JSON. This is what the front end uses to interact with the back end and vice versa. So if you click send, you'll see the two games that are in the database in JSON format. The two games that we currently have in the database. And then you could also do it by their ID. So let's say we want to get just Super Mario Bros. We do /2 because that's its ID. Click send, and all we get is Super Mario Bros. This is how the delete functionality works. It gets the game by its ID and then just removes that game. And I also plan to incorporate editing, so we'll also use this. So let's say now we want to use a post. And we have to post to this URL because this is where the API's URL is. And I already have a body. I'm posting this information right here to my API. I'm sending a post request to my API, and this is the information I'm going to send. So if I click send, it says game added successfully. Now if we go back to the MySQL database and we refresh, you'll see that the data that I just posted from Postman went through successfully, and you'll see it here. And you'll also see it reflected on the web page. And that's it for showcasing my project. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I'm very proud of this project. I would definitely love to talk about it more. Well, that's it. Okay, thank you.